The second section of Chapter 2 is conditional statements. So this means we're going to be writing a whole bunch of sentences today. A conditional statement is an if-then statement. So that means it has the words if and then inside of it. The hypothesis is always the part that follows the word if, and the conclusion is always the part that follows the word then. So let's take a look. It says, what is the hypothesis and the conclusion of the conditional? If an animal is a robin, then the animal is a bird. The hypothesis is the part that comes after the word if. So that means my hypothesis would be an animal is a robin. The conclusion is the part that comes after the word then. So my conclusion is the animal is a bird. Pause the video and try the got it question. In the got it question, you should be finding the hypothesis and conclusion of if you are late to class, then you will receive a tardy. The hypothesis is the part after the word if, so you should be listing you are late to class. The conclusion is the part after the word then, so you should be listing you will receive a tardy. The biggest thing is make sure you're not including the words if and then. Alright, next piece. How do I write a conditional? So suppose they give me a statement. Vertical angles share a vertex. I need to write that as a conditional statement. So that means I need to put the words if and then in there. Now, we could just do if vertical angles then share a vertex, right? That would be most logical. But that doesn't sound grammatically correct. So you want to make sure you start with if and then some generic object, like if an animal, if a bird, if a polygon, something to that nature. So in this case, since I'm talking about vertical angles, I would say if an angle or pair of angles are vertical angles, then they share a vertex. So try and make sure you're putting in those generic words after the word if to make it sound grammatically correct. Alright, you're going to pause the video and try the got it question. So my sentence is dolphins are mammals. So remember, I don't want to just put if dolphins then mammals. I want to be somewhat specific. So I'm going to say if an animal is a dolphin, then it is a mammal. Now some people tend to just put if it is a dolphin, then it is a mammal. Make sure you're specific on this first one because not necessarily do you want to put it on both of them. Okay. The next one is where you find the truth value. Truth value is just determining if it's true or false. So here we have a conditional statement, and I want you to define the truth value. If it's false, we have to give a counterexample. If a woman is Hungarian, then she is European. I didn't know the answer to that question, so I had to look up Europe and see what countries were in there. This is true because Hungary is in Europe. So I just write true. If a number is divisible by 3, then it is odd. I put false because if I divide 12 by 3, that quotient is not odd. So here is my counterexample. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Alright, on the next piece here. Here's where you're going to be writing more sentences. So we've been doing conditional statements. So that's the if-then statements. But there's 3 other kind that you also need to be aware of. So I can write the converse of a conditional statement. And that's where you're going to switch around the hypothesis and the conclusion. Okay, so you might make that note. Inverse is where you're going to negate it. So that means I'm going to be putting the word not on both the hypothesis and the conclusion. Then last, contrapositive is where I'm going to do both of these things. I'm going to switch the hypothesis and conclusion, and I'm not going to negate both of them. The other chart that you see on here is just talking about equivalent statements, and what that means is when you have to find these truth values, this is a quick hint to make sure that you have them correct because the conditional statement and the contrapositive, those should always be true. And if I have the converse and the inverse, those are, not true, but they should be the same. And if I have the converse and inverse, those should be the same as well. So just double checking, making sure that the first and last are the same truth value and the second and third are the same. Okay, let's put this to test here. So it gives me a statement, if the figure is a square, then the figure is a quadrilateral. You have to write the converse, inverse, contrapositive, and you have to give truth values. So, converse, this is where we're going to switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. So I'm just going to flip-flop them. So now it's going to say, if a figure is a quadrilateral, then it's a square. So that's my converse. Truth value. Well, if I have any quadrilateral, will it always be a square? No, that would be false, and then my counterexample is a rectangle. Inverse, that's where we want to take this statement and negate it. So I'm going to put the word not in there. So if a figure is not a square, then it is not a quadrilateral. Truth value. If a figure isn't a square, then it's not a quadrilateral. So I think of something that's not a square, like a rectangle. Is a rectangle not a quadrilateral? That is false. A rectangle is a quadrilateral. So notice these truth values are always the same because it's a converse and an inverse. Last, contrapositive, I'm going to switch and negate both. So that means if a figure is not a quadrilateral, then it's not a square. So then I could think through this. If it's not a quadrilateral, so maybe it's a five-sided figure, then it's not a square. If you're not sure if this is correct, always go back to the truth value of the very first one. So my first one, if a figure is a square, then it's a quadrilateral. That's true. So I know down here that this one has to be true. So if you can't think through this part, I would just automatically copy down the truth value. And to be honest, that's what I normally do. Alright, you're going to pause the video and try the next. It says if a vegetable is a carrot, then it contains beta-carotene. I had to look that up. A beta-carotene means that it just has the color orange in it. So the converse, remember, is where we switch it. So I'm going to do if a vegetable contains beta-carotene, then it's a carrot. So a vegetable contains beta-carotene. I'm thinking of a vegetable that's orange, but it's a carrot. Well, I have a pumpkin that's orange, but it's not a carrot. So that's why it's false, and then my counterexample is pumpkin. Inverse. This is where we want to negate it. So don't do any switching, just negate. So if a vegetable is not a carrot, then it does not contain beta-carotene. Well, again, pumpkins are not carrots, and they do contain beta-carotene, which is why that is false. Last, contrapositive is where we're going to do both. So I'm going to switch and negate all at the same time. If a vegetable doesn't contain beta-carotene, then it's not a carrot. Again, you can try and think through that or automatically go up here. If a vegetable is a carrot, then it contains beta-carotene. That is true, so that's how I know that contrapositive is also true. So truth values, again, make sure conditional and contrapositive have the same truth value. Make sure converse and inverse have the same truth value. Okay? The other thing is, there's a lot of vocab, so making sure you know what kind of sentence structure that each one is.